Good morning. I trust you had a fantastic weekend. I had a good one, played tennis, got a lot of work done. I got thousands of slides. Nobody uses them anymore. I decided to go through them all and kind of organize them. So I got a big part of that done. And so now we're into Psalm chapter 3. Okay, and if you'll turn to Psalm 3 just for a second, you'll see in the very top of it, there's an epitaph. It's not inspired. It was added by editors later to give a historical background to why this particular psalm, the occasion for this particular psalm to get written. And it says here, a psalm of David when he fled from his son Absalom. Okay, so even before we get into the psalm, we have to do something first. We have to go back into historical context. Why was David's son? Okay, I lost you for a second there, didn't I? See, that's one of the problems I'm having. It's just trying to reconnect. I don't know if I'm connected now or not. I think I am. Okay, if not, can you imagine me doing this and talking to myself before a phone? You know, I need to get a camera and put it on my thing, on my computer. It's one of those webcams, okay? And so I'll see about that this week. But I hope I'm live. I'm hoping people see me, okay? Anyway, before we get into this psalm, we have to look at why was David's son Absalom? Okay, Dolores says she's watching, so I must be live. Okay, why was David's son Absalom trying to kill his father? Man, that's got to be a hard thing. It's bad enough when somebody from the world and you got one of your enemies that's after you. You know, I've had people try to kill me before, you know, and they've almost been successful. Well, fortunately, God intervened in many different ways and saved my life. And but I know what it's like to be chased for somebody to stab and shoot you. I know what that's like. So when you're running for your life, you're in real danger. David's running. Okay, what was the occasion that caused David to take off? Well, you got to go back all the way to 2 Samuel. And here's David. He's in his palace. He's about 50 years old, middle age, you know. And all his troops had gone off to war. And it was a nice day. He's up on his rooftop, you know, looking over the balcony, and he looks down and he sees this beautiful woman taking a bath. Okay, why she was outside doing this in public, I don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us. But David looked down at her and in his mind, he began to lust for her. Okay? Man, lust is a terrible... If lust grabs you and then you want it so bad that it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. You know, it's sort of like in that time of lust, you're temporarily insane. Because this is a man that was after God's heart. Doesn't say he possessed it. It says that he was a man like no other that was after God's heart. Surely he had to know that God is omniscient. He sees everything. He knows everything. But lust has a way of blocking all that out. You know, maybe God's not looking at this one moment. He's off on vacation somewhere. So he lusts. He finds out that the woman that he's looking at was Bathsheba. She is married to one of his loyal soldiers. You know the rest of the story. He ended up bringing her upstairs into his room. He committed adultery with her. She finds out she's pregnant with his child. He then has Uriah, her husband, try to come back and sleep with her, but he wouldn't do it because he still felt loyal to his soldier. This was a very loyal man of David. David betrayed his loyalty. He betrayed his allegiance to his soldiers, to God, everything that he could possibly do wrong for the sake of a moment of lust. And then he has Uriah killed. Okay. Nathan the prophet comes and tells David what he had done because he tried to hide it for a long time. The baby that Bathsheba was pregnant with died. She later had another child by David who was Solomon. Very interesting story and grace of God in there. That's a whole nother story. Meanwhile, God, through Nathan the prophet, tells David, I'm not going to kill you, but because you are the leader of Israel and everybody knows what you did, I got to punish you in some way, as a deterrent to everybody, since you're the leader. And he says, you're never going to have freedom from internal strife in your family again. Now, man, I can't think of a worse thing than that, especially a lot of families having struggles, in their families for different reasons. But let me make this one point clear before we go any further. Nobody's responsible for another person's sins but their own. This idea that the fathers pass on their sins to the sons is not what the Bible is teaching. No son is responsible for his father's sins. I'm not responsible for my dad's sins or my grandfather's sins. They committed their sins. I'm responsible for my sins. However, that being said, there is an example that's set, okay, that you can follow into that pattern. That's what the Bible talks about, unless that pattern is broken and understood. Well, what happens? A little later on, and if you go in 2 Samuel chapter 13, the story begins to emerge of what happens with Amnon, one of David's oldest son. He ends up falling in love with his half-sister, Tamar. Okay, and it says here that Amnon became frustrated to the point of illness on account of his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin. And it seemed impossible for him to do anything to her. He was trying to put his moves on her over and over and over again. He was the ultimate player trying to get in her pants. She wouldn't let him. And she's doing everything possible to keep him at arm's distance. Okay? And it says here that he loved her. And we're going to talk about that word in a minute. I don't think he loved her. I think he was infatuated with her with lust. Okay, as we'll see here in a minute. But he was so lusting after to the point of being sick. Well, he's got this friend of his. Okay? He has a friend named Jonadab who comes on the scene. Now, Jonadab is a shrewd individual. He's the thinker. He's the one that's always thinking evil. He's the one that's always scheming and making plans on how to advance himself at the expense of others without putting his own life on the line. Okay? If you got friends like this, you need to get rid of them. Jonadab was the son of Shemiah. He was David's brother. And it says Jonadab was a very shrewd man. And he asked Ammon, why are you sick every day? And Ammon tells him, it says, I'm in love with Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister. Okay, that's his half-sister. And so he says, I don't know how to get to her. So Jonadab tells Amnon to fake that he's sick and then asks his father to send Tamar to make food in front of him and then feed him to help bring him back to health. And Amnon decides to do that, and it goes as planned. And so Tamar comes to his room. She's making bread for him. I guess that's what they made in those days. She netted it, kind of like tortillas, rolling them and all that. And he's laying in there, oh, I'm sick. He says, come over here and bring it to me. Oh, by the way, the rest of you servants, leave, close the door because I don't want anybody to see her feeding me. When she gets close to him, he tells her, come and lay with me. And she says, no, this cannot be. So he grabs her. He overpowers her and rapes her. Very interesting, but after he raped her, it says, then Ammon hated her with an intense hatred. In fact, he hated her more than he loved her. And Ammon said to her, get up and get out of here. And she refused. She says, no, this is worse than what you just did to me. You know, you're a foolish man, and all your shame's going to be known all over Israel. And so he called his attendants and had her thrown out. He says he loves her. He has her. Now he hates her. Who did that before? Kind of like his father David, didn't he? Okay, so now Absalom, Tamar's brother, full brother, finds out about it. Okay? He wants to kill Amnon. But he doesn't say anything. He's got to wait for the right moment in order to kill him. Okay? Now, if somebody had done that to my sister, what would you have done? If somebody, you had an innocent sister, brought her through pretense, overpowered her, and raped her, what would you have done? Well, my flesh would go in my back room, get my pistol, go find him, and blow his brains out. That's what the flesh wants to do. So I'm not, when Ammon is thinking and premeditating about killing his half-brother Ammon for disgracing his sister, I can understand that. Okay? As a Christian, though, you have to restrain yourself from that, recognizing that God wants exclusive vengeance, rights. Okay? Absalom doesn't do that. Okay? He's waiting for the right occasion to kill Ammon. Whatever happened to Tamar? She goes and lives in Absalom's house. Okay? We don't hear any more about her. We do hear some more about Jonadab. Much later, when he returns with news concerning Absalom, then we don't hear any more about him anymore. You know? So certain people come in your life, the devil has somebody everywhere. They come in, they say what they got to do, they do their dirty dude, and they're gone. Okay? So now, we're at the point where David, okay, he finds out that Absalom wants to have a party and invite all his sons there, including David. David says, no, I don't need to go. And Absalom says, well, let Ammon come in your place. And why do you want Ammon there? Well, just do it. He keeps pestering David till David relinquishes and lets Ammon go to his house for this party. Well, Absalom had told his servants, when Ammon is here and he starts drinking a lot, he starts feeling pretty good, you rise up and kill him. And that's in fact what they did. So what started off with lust for Ammon now ends with his death for having raped his sister while he was in a drunken stupor. What a life to end like that. I've known a lot of guys that died like that, okay? You don't fool around with another person's wife or be involved with rape and expect them to forgive you so innocently. You read what Proverbs says about a man's anger, what happens when he discovers that somebody committed adultery with his wife or something, you know, and gets involved in that way with his kids. So what ends up happening is David finds out what Absalom does. Absalom takes off. He's gone with a lot of his servants, okay? He's on the run. And so he's gone for some years. Now, here's the problem that happened, is that David never did anything to Ammon, his oldest son, for having raped his daughter. Okay, and the reason I believe he didn't do anything is because he had committed adultery with Bathsheba and had killed her husband. And with that guilty conscience, he probably didn't feel he had the right to discipline his son. And he never did anything about it. So what does Absalom takes it on himself? He ends up killing Ammon, and now he's on the run. Okay, fast forward a couple of years. Joab, who was the general for David, Absalom approaches him and says, will you go and talk to David and see if I can come back home? And so Joab goes and tells David. David says, yes, but I don't want to see his face. He can come to the city, but I don't want to see him. And so finally Absalom comes back to the city. Nothing's done to him. A couple of years goes by, and then he tells Joab again, go and talk to David and tell him I want to see him face to face. And Joab does, and eventually David sees him face to face. Meanwhile, Absalom is setting himself up to be king. Okay? He's got 50 runners. He sets himself up the gate when people come in and they want to get all their, in the gates in Israel, that's where justice was done and judges were there and a lot of business was transacted. He would set himself up there, and he was giving people what they wanted when they came to the gates, much like these Democrats do. He was stealing the hearts of these people. And so he finally comes up with this scheme with a number of runners to go and blow the horn. And when they blow the horn, they're to announce to everybody that Absalom is now king. Well, somebody runs and tells David, Absalom, your son, is declaring king. Now, David knows he doesn't have a lot of time to waste. Okay, because he knows the intent of Absalom is to be king. And in order for him to be king, he has got to kill his father. Worse, he's going to end up sleeping with his concubines or all his mistress to totally shame David. Okay? So there's no possibility of there being any reconciliation after that happens. So David gathers all his servants, he gets everything together, and he takes off across the Jordan. Okay? This is where we pick up in Psalm 3. So that's the historical background. So it's really important that as you get into the Psalms, that you study what the historical background was. See, without knowing that, I wouldn't be able to say, as David said, even in Psalm 3, verse 1, oh Lord, how many are my foes? You can kind of get the sense and feeling he's on the run, okay? And he's this close to being killed. And especially as he knows that the popularity of the people had turned against him and was going towards his son. Okay, with that background, I'm going to conclude this message, and we're going to get into Psalm 3 tomorrow. And then I'm going to give you a study guide on the following day. Couple of observations here. We're responsible for our own sins, nobody else. But we do set an example. I've always said, and I've always done this with my kids, if I've done something wrong, I always ask them, I acknowledge it, I admit it, I ask them to forgive me. I'll do that with anybody, because you don't want to leave stuff and have business unfinished between you and anybody. So much as it is possible with you, you want to be at peace with everybody. Sometimes that's not possible. There are people that I'm estranged with, that I have tried to reconcile with, they refuse. At that point, the ball is in their lap, okay? I've done everything in my power to bridge that reconciliation. Problem is, when you let a lot of time go by and one person gets bitter, there's no telling what they may do, okay? And so that's why you need to totally trust and put all these things into God's hands. So we'll get into Psalm 3 tomorrow. Y'all have a great day. God bless y'all.